And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. This is your friend Charlie Hunter in Bellows Falls, Vermont. Welcome to another Reasonably Fine Art Talk. It's lovely to be here today. It's lovely to have you all with us. And I am thrilled to get to talk to my friend Stephanie Hartshorn out there in Denver. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Charlie.
Welcome to the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. What's going on in Hartshorn?
Thank you. What's going on out here? I always feel like the big question. Gosh, what's going on? Can you prompt me on that? Give me a smaller bit.
Absolutely. Is the year of 2025 becoming a year of exploration and furtherance of the artistic vision, or are you continuing down a well-trod path that feels like you're in a groove? What's happening?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes, it's. I think we all are. Any artist who's got it in them we're constantly kind of opening and looking and exploring and learning more, right? The whole thing of the more I do this, the more I feel like I need to learn and or the more there is to learn about. And I've stepped into that more. There's been a number of years where I've talked about, I'd really love to do this, dive into this a little bit more, dive into this thing. And then I put it off. And this year I said, 2025 is the year and we're going to do it. So no more talking about it. I'm opening up to things with color, with subject matter, and even stylistically, not to go way outside of what I do, but it's sort of a parallel body of work that's forming. It's like,
cool.
It's fun.
And we'll get into that when we get into the slideshow portion. So for those of us who may not be that familiar with the Hartshorn legend, water there, you're hydrating. The Hartshorn hydration system.
We got to do that in Colorado.
So anyway, how'd you come to be a professional artist? What's the journey been?
The journey. All right. I came to it later in life. I mean, it felt late at the time, and now I smile and say that I wasn't really that late. But when I was young, I liked art. I didn't think that was anything unusual relative to my friends. And in the summer, I think in my grade school years, I enrolled in some summer classes down in Colorado Springs. And I'm pretty sure I remember I think the first one I took was painting, probably tempera painting or, something like that. And I'm pretty sure I remember not liking it, really frustrated with it. And then the next class I took was clay, like hand building. And I thought, this is cool. The next summer I took more clay and wheel throwing and things like that. I was just enamored, loved it. And that's where art stopped for me until much later. I put my focus more into sciences and thought, I love chemistry. I want to go do that. And I ended up going to an engineering school with a focus on chemical. Yeah, I was going to be a chemical engineer. I had visions of being in a white lab coat and working in a research lab. And I still think that's cool. But little did I know, I'm really a creative. I'm very much a creative. So I've got the two parts. I've got a little bit, certainly of a nerd brain, but I am a creative. And I left that school, completely felt like, now what am I going to do? After a year and a half, I got a degree in architecture. And that is the marriage of the two, this engineering aspect and then the creative piece. I still wasn't wildly creative. People will think, since you did architecture, you've got all of this base. I wouldn't argue that I don't have there's design conversation in there and theory and everything. But when I came into all of that, when I was in college, we were already moving into AutoCAD. So the hand drawing bit was not very active for me. And Charlie, I would not doing school projects. I was like, you guys don't really need to see my drawings. You really don't need to see these. And I'm in there with some, students that already had this beautiful art base. Honestly, it was not until after I started the family and my first daughter was born, I ended up staying home for 6 years. And on that last year, I got the bug to go paint. And I think I'm certain I give the credit to both my daughters of just the time we would spend together creating anything and everything. Instead of there being the gathering table in the kitchen, it was the craft area and everything was game. And yeah, I believe I wanted a little bit of an adult experience. And I thought painting that, because I can't do clay. I'm not going to get a kiln and, the whole thing. I loved it, Charlie. That's when it began. And I was 35 when I took that class. And I remember we did it was palette knife. And I'd never experienced oil painting. And the palette knife, if you've worked with clay, the tools that you use when you're working with clay are very similar to these palette knives. And then you probably know these tools. These guys. Yeah.
Right.
These are like, the ribs that you use to pull your pots up and or your vessels. And I immediately felt that connection to my childhood of clay. And I was like, oh, there it is. The viscosity of that paint was just yummy and buttery and creamy. And we just mixed color really for the first half of that whole stint. And it was just joyous to see what was happening there. So that's how I got there. And then it just slowly but surely built up. I did go back. I worked in the field of architecture. I did work for 10 years. So I practiced in architecture for 10 years. And yeah, then when my girls were born, I pulled out for that time. I went back for about 3 years. And that's when I was, then I plugged into a couple artists that I studied with. And I just was chomping at the bit to get back to art. So when 2009 came around and the economy went sideways and everything, architects, so many people got hit hard with that, but that was my exit. And it was perfect timing because I was so ready to move into painting. And so the day that I left that firm, I bottle of champagne and was like, here we go. Here's a new chapter. Yeah.
And I first met you, I believe, at Door County Planair.
Yep.
And then you and I both do a Buffalo Bill art show and sale in Cody, Wyoming.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so you're not really doing that much plein air stuff anymore, are you? It's mostly
no. Yeah, I'm not. And Charlie, the funny Door County, it's a great story. I knew nothing about the plein air world, nothing about the plein air circuit at all. I really hadn't done a whole lot of it. And I was in a magazine like Artist to Watch. And Kay, you remember Kay, she calls me up and she says, hey, we'd love to have you come out and do the Door County plein air. And I said, tell me more. She's telling me about it. And I said, man, I really haven't done. Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's so much fun. You're going to have so much fun. The people are great. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So I go out there with an easel. It's still probably barely broken. I mean, it really wasn't broken in very much, and for certainly outside. And I just dove in and I went for it. And so that was baptism by fire.
Yeah.
And I knew, and I really didn't know. I knew one artist, and I knew of one artist, and it was Tim Horn. And I remember I love his work so much. I can't believe I'm going to be doing an event with him. And I was really kind of like a fangirl. I saw him. When I drove in, he's over painting, and I'm like, oh my God, there's Tim. And we ended up introducing ourselves, and I told him, hey, I've been a big fan of your work. And later we ended up in this really fun chat, and I revealed to him, like I'm a fangirl. And he laughed, saying, I go, you're one of my heroes. And he said, you know who else is here, right? And I said, hey man, we all have our heroes and you're mine. We had a blast. We went out and painted at the end of that week, and the rest is history.
Great. Well, let's start looking at the art.
Yeah.
And so this is pre-COVID, and this might well be a Door County piece. I don't know. What's the story behind it? It could be inspired by Door County because it is 30 by 60, and you're not going to be doing that as a plein air piece.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I, being able to go out to Door County, driving from Denver out to, Door County was awesome. So the first year I flew, and from that point forward, every year after that, I drove, just completely absorbed, taking in the landscape. So this is along the drive. This is probably in Iowa, actually. And just when I go out, I love barns, and that has evolved now to, well, not every barn is one that, sorry, barns, but not every single one of you is worthy of painting. And it's just getting more discernment. And what gets me excited are the arrangements now of the buildings, how they lay on that land and how they break it up. And so when I come to something of, this, like I've got this little farmhouse and the silo and I'm like, this is exciting, really exciting. So that's, kind of where that's located. And this piece, I love that we're talking about it, I was pushing more. I was really opening up into what I call weaving of color. So you can see in that foreground that there's a dark, deep color, and then there's a little bit of this orange underneath there, and then I'm coming over the top of it. And that painting just worked out so beautifully to have the layers and seeing through them. I look for ways to, I was pushing more abstraction or abstract texture in this. And that's my interest, is to, how do I want to paint this landscape subject, but I really have a deep affection for abstract and contemporary work, art making, and how all that happens.
I hear you. I think there are a bunch of us who are sort of exploring that. I think there are a bunch of us who sort of came into the plein air world at about the same time, or came into professional painting at about the same time, who are now exploring, the reliance on nominals, on subject matter, trying to move beyond that. But I still need some sort of subject matter to climb into the zone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like the piece behind me right now is obviously a bridge and stuff, but I want to push it into being more abstract. I don't know, and so this is my idea of an underpainting that I'm going to do stuff on top of. But I may need to move into something where I'm not even being that literal at the beginning, because that impulse is still there to be depictive. And I think those of us who started out being literal, we have a very hard time leaping into the purely wild.
100%, 100%. You very well said. I am right there with you. Sometimes my underpainting goes down really loose and abstractly, and it's, oh, that's really great. Other times even at that, I build on top of it, and then it goes from this loose experience into this tight one. So that architect or detail-y aspect comes in, and I want to make sure I get everything really right. And then it feels tight. So then comes the breaking down of that. And all right, we've got all that in place. Feels good. I can relax now. And now how can I start bringing in movement into the painting, because we're painting these, I want to say, stagnant structures that they're just there. There's not a whole life to a building. It's right there. There's not a lot of movement, but allowing a person to move through it with color and lost edges and things like that, it becomes very exciting. So, yeah.
And you're doing that in this one. I think it's very interesting. The red vertical in the silo over toward the right.
Yeah.
You're allowing, I assume there was a big vertical red brush stroke and you've painted over that in the body of the silo. But
Yeah.
are you letting bits of the red show through, or was that dark red added at the end that's in the sky and in the ground plane in front of the silo?
Right. That was an early mark. So something that's in architecture, when we were doing everything in CAD or in these 3D modeling programs, everything that you put in there is on its own layer. Electrical is on a layer, electrical, mechanical, the finishes are on a layer, the walls are on a layer. So you can go in there depending on what you need, turning things on and off. And that's how I relate to my paintings. And thinking about abstraction, color movement, that early underpainting stage is that big base, like what you're talking about. It's very similar. We start very similarly. I even have something over here that is an underpainting stage. And so there's that dark base coming in, starting to add other colors. I start to think about future of, I would love for some, I want not necessarily unexpected color, but areas, flecks, little bits of color to show up later, but they need to be underneath. So I'm kind of thinking ahead. And on this, there would be a red layer, if you will. And if you just looked at where the red was in that early stage, I'm thinking about that in the visual abstraction. So here's a big, that big vertical there on the right. I'm trying to think where I had some others. I had some others in some pockets that are kind of buried in there now.
Well, I can see some. There's part of your red layers in the foundation of the house over there on the left.
Yeah. So I'm looking for that, knowing that I'm going to have a house there, in the silo there. It's like these are the beginnings of those forms, but I'm gonna move this red color around, and it's shape extension. That and I've found that, I think this comes from also in architecture drawing. If you look at architectural renderings and things, architects have, and we kind of develop this style. You're taught that your line, when you come to a corner, it's not a tight corner. It kind of goes past, and there'll be like a little.
Okay.
And I think that that's part of what I play around with on a larger scale, on both small and large scale. I do a lot of like a vertical pull or a horizontal pull with my tool, moving the paint around, or my brush strokes. They seems to always be this vertical, horizontal. And when you have a non-close, can I do this with my fingers? If the rectangle is completely tight all around, we are boxed in, and it's just the holding. And when you have a little tail come out, or it doesn't quite come to the corner, now there's a way to move out of that. We still hold the form, but now we have a passage out into another area, or the longer line directs us up to something else. So I'm thinking on that small and larger scale when I do paintings like this. Where can I move that around?
Right. Now, this one is also from 2019, and
Yeah.
I love how this involves the viewer, but with the shadow reaching out to the viewer. So the viewer is swept into the painting by the traveling through the shadow. And then the white line, which is rendered purple because it's in the shade, is a barrier, but yet the viewer is able to leap through because of the dark extending up into the fence and then extending down through the pickets. And it expands out again up through the trees. But this to me, I just love this piece. I'd not seen this before.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was completely enamored. That shadow pattern in the field there was everything. And I thought, how cool would that to be to paint? And also felt this is, outside of the box, coming in, even the placement of the tree, it's like right in the center, but when it has the variation, all this, it worked out really beautifully. That was a fun piece to work on, and then figure out, as you do too, is how do I create these textures, so I'm not drawing every little thing, and getting into that closer. There's a lot of just texture breakdown. It was really fun to figure that out. Yeah.
And I'm again, after what you said in the previous slide about the layers, I could see there was like a dark reddish brown layer around this. Now we have a few comments I'm going to put up on the screen here. First is that Kay Sneva says, if you're still driving to Door County, she would recommend driving Interstate 90 or 94 over Interstate 80. Just her 2 cents worth, I guess.
Totally.
So everyone take note of that.
I know, totally. I each year I drove out, I would do a slightly different route. I would be on 80 for a little while, and then I would kick up and start to really meander around. Yeah.
Yeah, meandering around on the way up to Door County is absolutely fantastic.
It's the best. I wished I could have opened it up to, how about I do a 4-day drive out there, instead of 2, or how about 5, I'm like, all right.
Well, you're getting good reviews from people.
Oh, thanks, Seth.
So Seth liked it. Betty Sue liked it. Laura Radwell, who I used to know a generation ago down in Northampton, Massachusetts, in a very different lifetime. Anyway, all kinds of people are saying very nice things about your work.
Why, thank you.
And this is another beauty, 2021 fence line. So this is 3 feet by 3 feet. So it's big, but it's not huge.
Right.
But it has such a sense of place, such an atmospheric quality to it. Talk to us about this.
This, Charlie, do you have pieces each year they kind of rise up, and it's as though they've painted themselves? You're just following along.
One out of 50. That's
yeah. That's about right.
Well, that's why we do the other 49, is to have it's that moment of touching the divine where it paints itself.
Absolutely. That is it. It's just this flow. It's so beautiful, and to be experiencing it while it's happening is it's a joy. And this was one of those pieces. It really kind of painted itself, and I was just there to witness that. I experienced things here that had been, when I looked back, I could see the progression. I could see how I finally got here, but this felt like, oh my gosh, I pulled off what I've been trying to do, and there was no trying about it. It was just happening. And some moments where I just stood back and said, oh, instead of doing what I normally do, I'm going to just let it be there and let it sit. And then this back and forth between what's going to be detailed versus abstracted, and just the pattern. I'll say this all the time. You work with that quite a bit, and it's letting the textures tell the story. You're not trying to render everything, and there's a tremendous amount that can happen. And I wanted to, this was a piece that I felt like, well, instead of being barn forward, as I really was a lot at that point, I now let the barn be to the side. We can see the roof over there, and it's that sense of place as you're coming in, and that big, gorgeous tree with the shade. And if you get in close to this painting, I was continuing to play with this line thing of abstraction, and all the way back where you get to the base of the tree, right at the horizon line, there's this stroke of red that comes along as a bead line, and it goes through there. And it just felt right. So there's other places in the tree where I've got blue or I've got some red. So when you get in close, I'm playing around with that. What I was talking about earlier, moving that through.
Yeah, no, that red in the dark in that the base of the tree is very important.
Yeah.
And I would also posit that the orangey red in the second fence post, and then directly below it in the shadow area there, the orangey red bit of weeds is very important in tying that the near and the moment of shade.
Yeah.
So again, a couple more comments. Artist says her draw is in awe. Amity Amy says she really relates to this conversation. She has a very hard time not getting into too much realism, but every time I get into details, I regret it. That's the story of our lives, Amity Amy.
I know, it's such a dance.
And Betty Sue says, I do love the sense of place. Someone may be meaning someone's incorrectly, but still knows exactly where this is near them. That's really true. Yes, that this could be any number of places, but you're going to feel like it's telling your story. You know.
Do you get? I would imagine. Do you get that a lot, Charlie, with your pieces?
Yeah, on the successful ones.
Yeah.
I know exactly where this is and have it be someplace completely not. But that happens with songwriters too, you know, and you know, why songwriters seem to love to not actually tell the real story of how a song came to be, so that the listener can still have their reality be a true reality. You know?
Yeah. I go back and forth between when somebody comes into the studio or see, where is this? Where's this from? And anymore, I'm like, I'll say, well, where are you from? I'm trying to lead conversations ahead of time because interestingly enough, I have lost a sale or two because I kind of burst their dream, you know?
Right.
So anyway, I love hearing the stories that come up and that feeling of place, and that's the gift.
And Steelworks says, I can feel the heat of the sun just by looking at your painting. And this painting, there's something you're doing here where, I mean, I feel like I know exactly what the atmosphere is like, that it's not crisp. There's humidity in this air, but there's still a brightness to the world. It's not that leaden humidity. So
yeah.
Now, Wedler Fine Art asks, explain the use of a square format and splitting the scene in two. I assume by putting that horizon line right in the center is but I'm just going to say before we let Stephanie talk about this, I think very important to this is that the focal point, as it were, where the eye is being drawn, yes, it is right in the center vertically, but horizontal, or it's the horizontal line is the center line, but the vertical is very much over to 1/3. You know, it's a third over there. So it's not that the focal point is the center of the square format. But anyway, that's enough of me blathering. You blather.
Well, I see. Can you just I've got no. I'm gonna let her. She's finally moving on. I never get people that come to my door when I'm doing things like this. I have a storefront, and here's this woman like. Okay, so we'll talk about the composition of it. Yes, you know that horizon line, just like you said, Charlie. It's like, yes, it is right there in the middle. However, when I look at the whole, that visual weight of the tree, I haven't made a bullseye. You know, that point where you're being pulled in is really over in that sweet spot that's just off to the to the left there. And that fence, the way that fence was coming in and all the lines, I mean, there's just such a dynamic composition of all directional things pulling you in. And that took over everything for me. And I did look at doing this in other compositions or crops. This was the most powerful. It captured everything I wanted. Everything else started to honestly sort of take away from the strength of the tree, and it just spread out. I wanted to, that tree was gorgeous.
Yeah, and square format can just be magical, and sometimes it feels like you're shoehorning a painting into the square format, and sometimes it is exactly the right answer, it seems.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Now this one has a very different feel, but it has a softness to it. I mean, I'm just going to flip back and forth, ladies and gentlemen. Just look at the atmosphere. Look at the mastery of atmosphere that she's got going. All right, Stephanie, talk about this one.
Talk about this one. This one falls into that category mentally of, I think all artists have artist paintings that we look at, we think of doing, and we think, oh my God, this one, artists are going to appreciate this one. I don't know if other people will, but they seem just, they're outliers. They're outliers, subject-wise or something. And this is one of, oh my gosh, propane tank, like a field of propane tanks and power lines. The light, the morning, I very early in the morning, I was driving over the crest of this hill, and the sun was just, starting to come up. And I just stopped in my tracks the way the light was hitting these tanks, and this beautiful, cool light, the atmosphere, everything about it. And I thought, I'm taking images of it, and I kept coming back, and I finally said, I've got to paint this. When we talk about storytelling, the West, this is a painting of the West. This is life now in the West, rural America and their need for propane, and just our industrial needs, the way we're connected with all the power lines, the telephone. This is it. It's not polished like when you come into the city. And there was just this beauty to it. It was quiet and serene. So I went for it. And I hadn't played around. And I was just recently, I did a Zoom workshop on skies. I have a lot of blue sky. I'm a Colorado girl. I see blue sky a lot. And one of the ways that I'm opening or expanding my vocabulary now is stepping into these other times of day and just other scenes. So this was an early one for me to do that.
Well, I love that you say that to you, this is a painting of the West, because we were talking before we went live, we were talking backstage, as it were, about the Western art shows and our desire to move beyond the stereotypical Western iconography. And yeah, this is a painting about America, or about modern day humanity.
Yes.
All the power lines, all the transformers, all the propane, about our ravening appetite for energy. So now this is a very muscular piece, and it's interesting to me. This is the smallest piece of the biggest thing.
Right. That is funny, isn't it? I did a solo show in August of last year. All of the pieces were urban. My background in architecture really came through. And when I was first painting, I was painting a little bit more of, the city and my and surrounding environment. And then I really have left that to, paint rural America and the American West and the ranch lands and farmlands and everything. And I thought, I want to shake it up. I want to come back to my architecture, deeper architectural roots and just see what happens. I had recently been in New York City and also San Francisco. My older daughter lives in San Francisco, and I've been up to New York a couple of times and had just been out with one of my girlfriends. And I got so excited. When after I graduated from college with my architectural degree, for a heartbeat or two and a semester, I pursued historic preservation. I've always loved the details of architecture and these old structures. When I passed by this bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, the detail underneath, the detail of the joinery and the everything was thought out. This was not just thrown up. And I would argue that the bridge building and pieces, the bridges out in New York City rival any of the architecture that's above, I want to say above ground. These are too, but you know what I mean? They're stunning. And we were driving along, and to be right next to it, so down and low, and taking that in, and the way the light was coming through, I got really, really excited. This one felt a little bit like, at the time, an outlier of, oh my gosh, you're painting underneath this bridge, and this is an odd composition and everything. Interestingly enough, as I'm looking at it, I could almost stretch and say it has a similar composition to the tree we were just looking to fence line. This directional piece and the way it drives you to a particular point in the canvas, but the main subject, really, you stay closer into the middle. Anyway, I'm thrilled that I did it and jumped off. That was the first piece that I completed for that show.
Right.
And yeah, the architecture was all of it. All the pieces that I did were challenging and wonderful to get back into after so many years being away from it.
Well, one thing I want to point out here that I think is interesting is that we were talking about getting restricted by detail, yet the water, the way you paint the reflections of the bridge in the water, are very non-literal. I mean, you're not getting obsessed with getting all those horizontals exactly right. Especially, I'm talking about the reflection in the space between the two bridge piers. In between the near pier and the far pier on the other shore. That just letting be an almost completely abstract set of marks.
Yeah. That water was really fun to paint. And I first started putting color in there, and I imagined that, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep taking this someplace. And I was able to leave that. And that's been another kind of holy grail for me, is how much will Steph allow herself to let something be more raw and be more unfinished? And it's, I think, a never-ending question of, when am I done? Let me back it up. How can I say the most with the least is a way of saying that. And the water in this, it worked. And there's little pieces down there that look peachy, kind of like it is the sky, and it is, but that's actually the wood of my panel coming through. So I have very thin layer down in that water.
Interesting.
I got to the panel color worked out beautifully. And for a while, I didn't even have the sky in there. This wood grain looked really cool back there behind it. And I thought, could I get away with that? Like, just leave all of that wood bare? And I chose to paint it. So,
well, Andy says it's a beautiful composition of the bridge, reminiscent of Gustave Caillebott's work. I don't know. I don't know that artist, but I'll have to look him up, Andy.
But thank you. I'll have to look him up.
And now we get more expansive again. Into the Silence, also 2024. We have several 2024s in here.
Yeah.
30 by 40. What's the story here?
So when I was saying earlier, I've been very, I say barn forward, very structure forward. And I've painted, I would say, more intimate views of barns, close up, getting into those details. And I didn't get into the foregrounds very much and push them back a whole lot. And for early on, I thought, man, I just don't like doing just pure landscape. I want an anchor. You and I were talking about that a little earlier too, of what can I anchor into? And so if there's a great tree, yes, no, I've been intrigued both with clouds more in the past 3 years ago. It's been longer. Probably COVID is when that really started to pull up, and the texture of the landscape. Fence line was a bit of a breakthrough on that, because it's, oh gosh, I'm dealing with all this foreground. I had never been that intimate with all of the grasses and weeds and soil, and how do you portray all of that when you're up close? Also, I feel that way about the clouds and landscape. So I do have a barn in this one. I wanted to put that in for scale. My travels, my driving, the love of being out there on the open road and watching these massive cloud banks, and they just travel along with you, you know that, Charlie. Like when you do your train or car, anything, it's like you have a companion out there. And some of those formations are of course, they're just stunning. The scale of them is what blows my mind. And this past year and a half, I'm thinking about that a lot, in pieces of how can I start portraying this vast sky. And Wyoming really gives you this, there's just this like flat line of a horizon and this massive sky. And every time I'm out in it, at some point I stop and just sit at the road and just, I'm just very moved by all of that. This painting is, okay, let's get the scale. So this tiny little barn back there, as you follow the path or the break in the grasses, just bold there. Now this one, normally I use this wedge tool a lot, probably 50%, almost as much as my brush, if not more. And this one, I had to step out of that for various reasons. And I ended up painting this one all with brush. And I haven't done that for a long time. The sky, I worked with my tool, the blue, but everything else came in pretty much with brush.
Okay. Yeah, because I when I was looking at the slideshow before, I was like, the brushwork is very different in this. So I guess it's just because it predominates. Now, were you working from one source photograph on this, or are these composite?
This is composite and made up. So I had a study of this early, and the way the foreground kind of laid in and color just broke, I thought, oh, I kind of like, what's happening there. So I held that. I looked at some different references for the tree line and everything. And then I had another with this big, this big cloud. And that's also new for me, Charlie. I'm very loyal to my reference photos. Just look to pull things from them, but I've not done a whole lot of manipulation with them. And I'm doing that now. It's fun.
Well, artist says on this that she totally loves your skies. Those clouds are beautiful. And Laura asked, what is the tool you mentioned? She may have missed this as she tuned in late, but
yeah. Laura, they're the Princeton makes these. They're the Catalyst wedges. They're silicone. People often think I'm painting with stones, like this gray one, because I get paint all over it. But they have a lovely flex, and the edges you can use for so many things, line and making, they're just a blast. I continue to find new textures and ways that I can use them.
And then this one, Blue Chair, this one best of show at the Buffalo Bill Art Show last year.
Yes.
And the thing that's so exciting again, Stephanie and I were talking about this before we went live. The thing that is so exciting about this is that generally the things that win the grand prizes at these Western art shows are the very traditional Western iconography, the charismatic megafauna, the vast, spectacular landscape, the view of Yellowstone, the portrayal of Native Americans or cowboy culture. And this is so humble. And it also, the other thing I love about this is that it's titled Blue Chair. Because that's just such a tiny bit of what constitutes the painting. But there's just something very wise about that as the title.
Thank you. Yeah, this driving through Wyoming. I can't remember the road that I'm on, but it's on their way to. It's on the way to Cody, and
hopefully it's near Thermopolis. I'm always happy.
Yeah, yep, and Hell's Kitchen or something out there. Or something. It's you're driving. There's nothing, and then it's like an oasis or something. It's like, here's Waltmans Store, and it brought a smile to my face the first year or two that I passed it, and there was such a curiosity of what is up with that? There's nothing else around, and or very little, and then I just know there's story here. I just can feel it. You can feel the human connection. Of course, it's not fully abandoned, but I couldn't quite tell. And so anyway, the next time I went through, I just said, that's it. I'm getting out and I'm going to go explore and take these photos. And yes, this chair, I think so many of us have seen them or know them, but that metal painted chair, kind of round back, sprayed. It's sort of a, turquoise, faded turquoise out there. And it's sitting just outside this window. The window, you can see when you get close, there's boxes up against the wall. It's not really an active store so much anymore, but there's evidence that people are still coming through here for one reason or another. There's a bank of mailboxes over there by the tree, and this pole, and I just, as I said, I know here we are, it's rural. People out in this pocket are miles and miles from one another. And the importance of being able to come and connect and feel communities, it's important for all of us. And so Waltmans is this spot, I'm sure, where people come in with whatever frequency or whatever rhythm to come pick up the mail. It's not getting there every day. And I'm sure cars sit here, people get out of the car, have their conversations. That chair must belong to the owner. And I just imagine the stories and the generations that have that it's been there. It's not wildly old, but it does go back probably to the 30s or something like that, maybe the original piece. And I did meet I think I've met two people that knew of it when they were young, and they used to go there, and it was a general store, full operating general store. So I loved that.
And then compositionally, can you just talk a little about how you built this composition? Because I love what you do with shadow. Over on the left-hand side, the cast shadow onto the roof of the building from the tree. Yeah. I think that is just such a beautiful passage. And the fact that everything under the eaves is in shadow until after that, as we transition from left to right. And then things are just in this symphony. Then we get into the symphony of abstract Mondrian-like grid of the frames and all that. It's just such a smart painting.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's neat that you said Mondrian. I a long time ago, there was a number of barns. I was looking at them, and I was struck with Mondrian. I said, gosh, the openings in this and some other things. I said, it kind of feels like one of his paintings. And it stuck with me. So yes, the colors of this, when I went by, that red and the white, and then there's some blue, I'm like, okay, this is wonderful. It worked really beautifully that store itself, where the real attention is what is in the light. And, nature was also working happily with me to, to, put this glow on that. The cloud, the sky back there, I created all of that. I don't quite know there really was probably nothing there, but compositionally, that was an important piece to bring in. The mass of the tree, the big tree next to the storefront, just the massing of all of that, and the poles. I just love all the stuff. And as much as it can work in my images, like the reference photos, I try to honor a lot of that, because I feel like nature does a pretty good job of, presenting. And weirdly enough, people's trash heaps also are quite beautiful at times. There's a red storage, what am I trying to say? Back there. That was an important thing to keep in there. Carly, we talked about the movement of color and where you're going around. And I'm like, oh, well, this is this great, here's a square of that red. And then the red or kind of brownish door to the side of the main storefront, just the repetitive of movement of those. And under the other tree under there, I allowed things to start to get looser and not have such a described edge. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And the fact that the red storage container is bisected by the vertical of the telephone pole, that is really important too, because it anchors that the storage container, which otherwise would be floating in a sea of
Right.
light brown.
Yeah. Mm.
And now this is also 2024. It's a big 36 by 60.
Yeah.
And you're flattening the heck out of this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How did this one come about? This strikes me as anomalous, but what fun of how the fire escapes are tying it all together.
Yeah, I photographed this building so many years ago. It could even be 10 years ago, and I've always wanted to paint the side of it, and I didn't want to, as we were saying, like this is a brick building. And originally I thought, well, I'm going to build up some layers and I'm going to come out in a particular way, which is more of a familiar approach. However, the scale of this, I thought, whoa, I don't, there's always a question when you get into big scales of how you're going to handle these big areas of color. And I put down a base layer of this that's Indian red over my wood. So the yellow that you're seeing come through, or that kind of buff color up high and anywhere on just the face is my wood panel that's coming through. And that went on beautifully, putting that in. Later, when it was, all right, how am I going to handle the brick texture? Like, seriously, Steph, how are you going to figure that one out? Because it's not a painted building. I can't go that flat with it. I took cues, as I do when landscape, of what lines, is there anything I can find to bump up? So if it's a field, there might be a place where a car had driven at some point. So you feel a little bit of depression okay, great. That might be a beautiful directional line for me to emphasize a little more and use. And with this, I could see where at different times there were things probably attached to the face of the brick on the outside, or there were just obvious. It's more the way it was built. You can see the brick comes down and then it changes a little. Well, that's because there's the floor that's happening on the other side. So my little architect-y gets into that. And there was just a slight difference in the coloration of that brick. I thought, well, okay, let me start by, and I'm going to glaze over this lighter, shade of something, because anyway, sorry, it gets into the super detail, but I pull that and then this beautiful, these are the happy accidents of, wait a minute, when I'm pulling the paint, and when I say that it's thin, I've thinned it down. I'm using, something like this or another tool, and it breaks. And sometimes that is the most beautiful break, and it creates its own shape. And like you learn to kind of control that, but it's still very much its own experience. And I just started to discover on the fly a way to get that down and say, you know what, I'm going to leave it, because I want to come in now. The question earlier, like with the dance of where's the detail and where do you let it not, you just let it be. I said, I want to have these tiny little vignettes of people's presence. So each door is a different home. And I love that idea in the urban world where we live on, well, not all of us, but we live on top of each other when you get down into the dense city. And I think about all the lives that are happening at once in this big, it's fascinating. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say maybe 5 different apartments here, and what's happening. And each of them have left a little bit on their balcony, or one has nothing. So does somebody live there or not? I wanted each one to stand on its own, and that brought everything together. So I went into detail only in that. Even the sides of the fire escape itself, the structure of that it's pretty lightly handled. The shadow that was underpainting, just lightly, spread on there. You can see some of the red that pulled down. But it's that patina that you see on old metal stairs like this. So it worked out quite beautifully. And the jeweler sign at the top, I had to shift and move that over compositionally. It wasn't in that place, but that's where it looked best. And the color of that next to this orange brick is wonderful. So that was very, very important in the composition.
Yeah, hearing this description is wonderfully helpful, because as you were talking about all the lives here and the vertical construction, that makes me think of Hopper's Early Sunday Morning, which is similar, of windows, and each window is slightly different, but it's all horizontal. This is doors, and it's vertical. And then I was also thinking of Hitchcock's Rear Window. Stewart has broken his leg and is spying on all his neighbors in the back. Oh, yeah. And this really, what is going on in all these and then also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The jeweler's sign, that also so denotes the passage of time, because the doors have been cut into the side of the building since that sign was painted. So there's so much going on in this. So neat. This
was one that went down beautifully when I finally got the concept of there's a whole abstract experience happening here, and then there's these, it's like sprinkles that come in that are the detail, but the lines, the shadows are there, but they're lightly drawn. And I was able to there's a lot of raw quality to it, and then we get the story. So it was a lot of fun building those textures on and creating all that. It was great painting. I miss it. Come back.
Yeah, the 2025 piece. Sundance.
Right. Yes, Sundance. All right. So this is this is the newest exploration, and I'm thrilled with it. Organic, so that helps. And I've wanted to do a sunflower series for years. I have such an affinity for wild sunflowers that comes from all sorts of things, but driving across the country, and you see these all over the place, and I get really excited when they start coming up. I love them for their tenacity. They'll grow anywhere, and also their delicacy. If you can clip off a branch, and if you don't get that baby or that stem, if you don't get that in the water very quickly, they're just gone. So there's a emotional sort of juxtaposition to me about the weeds, the wild sunflowers, and their beauty. I saw this as layers when I was talking about that before. So there's a front layer, which is everything that's rendered. And I studied that. I looked at that. I have some reference photos, but I also had to add things in. And if you were to just look at those, isolate them, I was looking at the centers of these, the dark shapes, and there's a rhythm. It feels very lyrical to me. And that felt perfect. The way that one stem is curving over and then brings you over to the next grouping. And then back behind, okay, so these are all in this big field of sunflowers, but I didn't want to get into all of that. I thought I originally just wanted to see this lyrical dance of the flowers. And in some images and some studies, I was just pulling away. I was just putting this kind of buttery yellow just around everything. And that's pretty cool. I've done that with some tractors and things like that, really isolate because they're sculptural. But there was more going on. And I thought, well, how can I talk about the field behind it? So I just explored this abstraction. So the darker yellow pockets that are little amoebas all over the place are, that loose interpretation of massing of the sunflowers that are back behind it. When I was laying this on, I had all this wood, and I just then felt, God, you can like pull the hook and pull me off the stage anytime. I almost wish I could show the progression of it, but when it was still wood, there were areas that just visually I knew abstractly I needed weight. So there's a chunk on the left and there's a chunk on the right, but the way those are shaped was important. And so I just smeared on some color in the background, like that underpainting of burnt sienna, probably some Payne's gray or maybe some ultramarine, and just up in these two weights that one was a little bit bigger than the other, and they kind of held the flowers together in their lightness. Then I came back over. I had an idea of how that was going to go, and I was completely wrong. So I had to, pull back, and I started to pull the paint off, and it left a beautiful kind of texture underneath there, and I went for it. So if you come in a little closer on those, it's playing around with carving shape out, laying it back in, and it's ghosted back there. I'm now kind of losing how I would keep describing it, but it was over on the right. It almost felt Art Nouveau, how some of the shapes were starting to appear. And I was just taking cues from the old marks underneath and filling them in or not filling them in. And it was really exciting. It was very exciting. And then after that, I came on with a thicker paint, and that's what that kind of buttery yellow is. And I laid that on top. But all of it, just this exploration of the gradation from large amoeba shapes to less and less and less as you go from left to right with the deeper yellow. I've got green in there, but it's not, I was making that up. But it's kind of speaking to the fact that there's foliage around. And then when you're up next to it, you see the rendering, now of the different heads of the sunflowers. Some I left to just be a little bit more raw than others, but that was really a blast to paint that.
Cool. Well, it has been terrific to see the strip through how you see the world and how you put it down on canvas. I think the work is spectacular. Thank you. What's happening? What's coming up in Hartshorn world?
Yeah. Well, the next thing really coming down the pike is Buffalo Bill. So we'll be out there for that. And then working on pieces that will be in the Coors Western in January of 2026. So that group is happening. There's another show in September here locally. Kind of, yeah.
Can one learn about all this at studiohartshorn.com?
Yes, they can. They can. And I've got teaching stuff. I'm starting to do at the end of each month is my plan. I just did one on Saturday. The last Saturdays of the month are these 2-hour I want to say deep dives. They're things that I'm interested in, so I'll be looking at them for myself during the month, and then it's sort of a share, and here's things that I learned, and here's reflections or something really fun to take along. So I may have studies, or I might lead students through something that I find interesting. So they're a little different than a straightforward, class on technique, but yeah, killing two birds with one stone. I just think it's kind of fun to share the random stuff that we start to get excited about, and that might be appealing to other people. So those are the things, and then I'll be doing more of these sunflowers. They're all going to be different. I know they're going to be different. Each one so far has been very, loose and exciting, but everything's happening a little differently, and that's been wonderful.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for spending time with us. And we'll be back next week or the week after with another reasonably fine art talk. We'll see you then.
Thanks so much.
Everybody. Bye-bye.